Hello. So this is our gender week. We are beginning our last module. It's crazy to think that we, are down to this last 4 weeks. We have so far been very theoretical and stayed with kind of these abstract, just ideas and generalizable concepts. And then now we began to kind of start applying them to people. And then this module, we're really going to get into that a little bit more, and apply all of these theories and concepts that we've been learning for the last, especially module 1 and 2, but module 3 as well, to real people doing real things in the real world, right? Because as we know, different genders, different identities. So race, class, status, all of these things affect how the interactions that you have, the resources that you have available to you, your privilege, your power, the culture, right, that within which you come will change your identities in the self and the interactions that you have as well, the way that you carry yourself, what you look like, all of those things matter in the making of a big capital S self. So while all of these kind of social processes that we've been talking about are generalizable to everybody, it looks different whenever it comes down to the distinct person that you are. So we're all socialized kind of in a generalizable way from the same culture, but then all of those different roles meet into our individual identities and then make us an individual within this larger society. So this, like I said, week is gender. We're going to discuss how we're socialized into gender, what that means for us as individuals, as well as groups and society as well, right? So that micro, meso, and macro levels that are always intertwined and affecting each other at all times. So first, let's discuss the difference between sex and gender, as that kind of can be they typically get conflated. So people say sex when they mean gender, they gender maybe when they mean sex, right? And people tend to think that they're the same thing, but they are not. They are very much so linked, and they affect one another. I mean, they are, sex defines gender in a lot of ways, right? But they are different. So, of course, sex is your biological, the biological difference between male and female, right? Your anatomy. That is your penis, your vagina, testes, ovaries. So it's your primary and secondary characteristics, right? So primary being the things that you're born with, right? That the penis, vagina, testes, ovaries, and then the secondary characteristics that come in later with your hormones, so facial hair, breasts, that's all I'm blanking at, right? But those other things that come at puberty typically, and then continue on as you grow and age, right? Throughout the life course, you're always kind of changing because your hormones fluctuate as well. But those are your secondary characteristics. So this is of course related, but not the same thing as gender. So gender is the self-perceptions, the expression, the expectations that people have about both sexes, right? So because you were born with a penis, you are supposed to dress with pants and polo shirt, and you're not supposed to wear a dress. Females are, usually can wear pants or a dress, but they typically wear more makeup, right? Big jewelry, to the point where, there are, of course, crossover. Some people, the way the trends go, however, those are primarily the gendered expectations for male and female. So we can typically think of gender as like masculinity and femininity. So how you're supposed to act, how you're supposed to dress, the way you're supposed to carry your body, all of those things are your gendered expectations. So that is outwards, right? Sex is inside your body. It's what you're born with. That could be changed and altered as well. And it is, of course, it's not as cut and dry. In this country, we like to think of things as binary. So male and female. And this is just scientifically not true. There are people who are born intersex who have different makeups than, just the prototypical, I guess, ones that we think about. And there are and it happens more than what we think about, what we know about. Georgianne Davis, who's in our department, has a wonderful TED Talk and has written lots of things about intersex. I highly encourage you to watch her TED Talk, right? You can just, I think, Google Georgianne Davis TED Talk, and it should be able to come out there. It's really, really relevant. Her work's really relevant to this chapter as well. If this kind of stuff interests you. There's the other things, like I said, so it's how you dress, but it's also the way that people expect you to be. So for a male, typically, right, if you have a penis, you are tough, assertive, and aggressive. If you have a vagina, you are nurturing, caring, demure, submissive, weak, these types of things. And this is very constricting, right? Because if you present as a female, then you're going to be treated that way by society, regardless of if you were strong or weak or assertive or whatever. And sometimes you're punished, right? So women being assertive sometimes is punished in a variety of ways in our society, even if that's kind of socially sanctioning you or, oh, honey, right, belittling you, not getting a job or not getting enough respect, right? All of those things can either, and also not being assertive can also not get you a job or not get you respect. Like it's just, so gender is really kind of sociologically what we look at. And we want to make sure that we disentangle those, because while gender definitely is linked to sex, they are, like I said, they are different. And just because somebody has anatomically one thing, they can perform, right? They can dress, they can walk, they can be posture, right? It can be different than what exactly is under the hood, right? All right, so of course that means that sex and gender are problematic. It's not always cut and dry, and it limits opportunity for both. And so for us, though, in this class, we're going to really concentrate on this kind of social psychology, symbolic interaction, and then namely for the gendered stuff for microsociology is dramaturgy. It's a lot about the performative aspects of gender, of gendering, right? Doing gender, of being gendered, of people putting expectations about how you should or shouldn't act because of the gender that you are. So just a few kind of terms that we can talk about that are really pertinent to the gender, to this kind of week's theme. So we are gendered, right? So this is similar to race and class, right? So we are raced, we are classed. So our bodies and the relations that stem from interaction signal, manage, negotiate the information about power and status, okay? So not only do we perform, which I'll go over next, right, our gender by wearing a dress, by wearing earrings, by wearing a ball cap, right, those sorts of things. We are also always being gendered, right? People are interacting with us because of that self-presentation of self. By showing that I'm a woman, people then engage with me in different ways. And of course, in this society, it's still a patriarchal society, so men have more power and privilege than women do. So just me presenting in this way and being a female biologically as well, right, tends to make me have less power and privilege. And so that comes from society. I mostly don't have any control over that, right? I can't control how other people interact with me on like a subconscious level, because those biases and stuff are already embedded from the socialization that we get just from being in the society. And it's not necessarily an individual's fault, because it's institutional, it's structural. It's something that people think of, oh, that's just how it is, right? Until you kind of get that critical lens, which sociology does a great job of teaching us. It's hard to recognize the ways that we are contributing to the inequalities that are embedded within the structure of society. So beyond our bodies being a site of gender, we also do sociology, right? So so we perform it. So like I said, our dress, our mannerisms, our speech, our posture, the way that we talk, the way we think sometimes at some, to some degree as well. So therefore it's also embodied. So what I think, how I hold myself. So Martin, actually one of your, the first person that we'll go over next, says that women's bodies are a source of anxiety and tentativeness, while men's are typically a source of power. So you think about how women sit, it's usually crossed legs, crossed arms. We don't take up a lot of space, right? We say, excuse me, we say, thank you. We say, I'm sorry a lot, right? We worry about the fat on our bodies. We worry about getting blemishes and how our face looks. So our bodies are very, are sources of anxiety and tentativeness. Where men, they take up a lot of space, they empower themselves, right? The dad bod's really cool and in right now. They don't have to do all the makeup and stuff. And in fact, if somebody found out they were wearing makeup, right, you could be shunned or made fun of by other men, typically. Yeah, so our agency is often displayed by the way that we use our bodies or don't use them, right? All right, so now let's skip over to the actual readings. So first you have Karen Martin's Becoming a Gendered Body. This piece focuses on how our bodies are gendered through childhood's hidden curriculum. And so hidden curriculum is a term that's used a lot for like a critical sociological lens. And this module is more critical. So we are still in that, micro-sociological interpretive paradigm, but we're bringing in some more critical lens by going over gender, race, like these power and privilege, these inequities, those sort of things. We are bringing in a little bit more of a critical lens. So this hidden curriculum is kind of this idea that school also, not only is it the curriculum, right, the math and the science and all of those things, reading, that we're being taught, that there's also a hidden curriculum that teaches, that subjugates bodies, that strengthens inequalities, that genders our bodies, right, for this one. So it tells very early on that the boys are better at math, girls are better at reading or English, or those types of things. The hard sciences versus soft sciences. I hate those words, by the way, but we know what we can envision what that means. And so there is this kind of hidden curriculum that is being taught that is mostly subconscious. I mean, a lot of daycare and elementary school, middle school teachers, high school teachers, even professors as well, don't realize that they are like continuing these patterns, right? That are, like I said, you're swimming in the sea of cultural expectations and norms and beliefs and values. And then through that curriculum, we tend to continue those through social. That's what socialization does, right? It takes one generation of people and transfers that knowledge to the next group, and often that comes with those norms, values, beliefs that were already there to begin with, and they get changed a little by little, but that's how socialization works. Is all these different institutions pass along these ideas of being what's right and wrong, and it is hard. It does happen, but it's hard to get those changed. So the hidden curriculum is a side effect of schooling through lessons which are learned but not necessarily openly intended. This is the transmission of culture, our norms, values, and beliefs, right? So children are disciplined by schools. This is what Martin is kind of getting at in this piece. Children are disciplined by schools. Their bodies are disciplined through regulation of their movements, right? Think about a kindergartner or pre-K. They're active. They want to go. They want to go play. They can't sit still for very long. And it's the teacher's job to make them sit still, to make them do work, to make them concentrate. And so a big part of that is disciplining their bodies, or disciplining their movements, I suppose. So discipline through regulation of their movements or lack thereof, and punishments for imposed rules. So we make rules. Don't yell, put your hand up, you have to ask to go to the bathroom, all these different, kind of rules that are there. If they don't follow them, they're punished, right? And that being punished reinforces the expectations that you should have. And then through these, we are also imposing gender. So they're also gendered through the way they dress, right? So Martin talks about how a lot of times before that she goes is in a preschool, and a lot of times these kids haven't ever seen another kid, right? So of course they know what they wear, what their parents wear, but or what their parents put them in before they go to preschool, but they don't have any like reference points, and they're also not just mentally at the place for them to really understand like pink is me and because I'm a girl, or blue is me because I'm a boy. And then they get into school, and then they have reference points, and they start putting these connections of, you know, I am this person, I am this way, so this is what I must like. They are this way, this is what they must like. And then teachers kind of reinforce those things, and parents as well start reinforcing those things. So the way that we treat students, right? So and this is kind of something that has been talked about all throughout the different grades, about how boys and girls are disciplined, how we speak to them while we're disciplining them, and all these other ways that we convey expectations of boys and girls. So this is very Goffmanian. Okay, so this piece is very actually everything that I talk about is very Goffmanian. So it's rooted in dramaturgy. So make sure that you make So make sure in your reflections that you kind of try to think about how this empirical work that Martin and Jones and Vaccaro, Schrock, and Maccabi, make sure you try to make that connection of how these empirical works reflect or bring out, enhance that theoretical perspective. Okay, so next we have that piece by Vaccaro, Schrock, and Maccabi. I may be saying that wrong, but Managing Emotional Manhood. So because much of this literature on gender really tends to focus on women, females, girls, because that's kind of where people, when you talk about power and privilege, a lot of what you talk about is gender, and gender typically, the way that we gender women typically gives them less power and privilege in society. So that's kind of where this sociology of gender kind of came out of. And then of course, other people came in and started doing work on masculinity and men, intersex, all these other different kind of intersections within gender. So this piece goes over masculinity, right? And masculinity is gendered, it's socialized into us, disciplined into the body. Therefore, of course, the identity and self, right? Both. So remember, regardless of how much an individual conforms or aligns with these expectations, they are no less present for all and generally socialized into each of us from childhood, from all institutions. So family, peers, school, media, work, etc. So we might not all each align with everything to do with manhood or masculinity or femininity, all those things, but we all know the cultural expectations, right? We all know the norms, the beliefs, the values. We know the penalties for not adhering to those. So regardless of what our individual lives look like, it is no less, the expectation and socialization into that is no less there. So this piece ties together a lot of theoretical pieces that we've talked about, in Module 1 and 2 especially. So including emotion management, emotion work, dramaturgy. This is specifically big, right, this entire week, like I said. And identity work is also really present in this piece specifically. Y'all should have no problem in your reflections, right, for this month, for this module. I find that this module reflection just really has the best content because people can finally see how these abstract things kind of fit us, the real people in the real world. So under the emotional management piece, they show how we culturally expect men to control their emotions, particularly fear in this case for the MMA fighters. Men are not supposed to be fearful. For an anecdotal response, right? If there's a spider in my house, my husband is going to be the spider catcher, right? And he can't, even if he didn't like spiders, he's got to suck it up, be a man and get it, right? Be a man, suck it up. All of those kind of culturally specific terms that we use. And really, many of you talked about this in your the module 2 reflection under the emotion. The emotions week, sorry. You all made these examples of how big girls don't cry, or boys don't cry, right? Big boys don't cry is more of that look of that example. But you all touched on these ways that we are socialized into specific emotions as children, right? And specifically gendered children. And so this will be a great example for those of you who really brought that up. And even if you didn't bring it up, you will definitely see it and hear it and be able to reflect on popular culture and media that you've heard, or maybe even in your own life, right? You might have heard these tropes of masculinity or femininity. And then the last one for the reading for this week is Nikki Jones, Working the Code in the Inner City. So this one really is a great one. I put it last because it serves as a good transition to the race section that comes up next week. So she tries to demystify violence for females, particularly minorities in the inner city. So there's been a lot of literature. So most literature on violence focuses on masculinity because men are expected or accepted violence, or as being violent, or being capable of violent, right? More so than women are. So Jones makes an argument that women use violence too. While there is crossover, of course, it comes to utility. So she posits that girls also utilize violence for their own purposes. And of course, she's taking a micro-sociological perspective. So she's asking, what does this violence mean for them? What purpose does it serve for them? And so she says that the violence for women in the inner city kind of serves as a similar purpose to males, but it does diverge a little bit in the ways that are very gender specific, right? So women tend to use violence, or girls. I think these are teenagers. They use it as a means to an end rather than like a defining characteristic of who they are, right? So women they still use violence for whatever purposes, for reputation, and mostly for reputation for both, right? For men and women, or girls and boys, they use it for reputation, right? Somebody gives you a look, they talk crap behind your back, right? You want to talk crap and it comes to blows or whatever, and they get in fights. And so for these girls, she found that a lot of the times it was a means to an end, where the men, it was a character trait, right? I'm tough. Where women are, yes, I'm tough, but it was because she was talking crap and I had to make her stop, right? Because it might endanger their reputation. So for next week, like I said, we're going to be going over race. This is so being raced, gendered, classed, these are all culturally defined, and really bring in the role of power and dominance. So how interactions and performances play out differently for particular intersections of identities. So we're going to be getting into what does it mean for people of color? What are all these interactions and dramaturg performance, identity stuff, emotion stuff? How does that work for people of color? What does that mean for people who have status issues, right? So are undocumented folks, and then for classed folks. So if you're in poverty, because of course in America we look down on people in poverty, and so being poor does affect your interactions and the way that people talk about you and treat you and stuff. And if you are a female who is undocumented, who is a person of color, right, and undocumented, and you're poor, well, then you have the more than trifecta, but the fourfecta, I don't know what that would be, of this intersection of identity that's really affected by all of these things. And your impression management is going to have to look different than other folks. Your emotional regulation is going to have to be different, and the way that you were socialized into those emotions. is going to be different. Let's see, your identity work is going to be affected, the way that other people treat you. All of these things are going to be an important factors in the empirical works that we're going to be reading over the next few weeks. So I hope that this lecture helped, kind of get you started in thinking about the pieces. If you have any trouble understanding or reading, please, like always, email me. Set up. We can have a conversation either in the office or over Skype, FaceTime, Google Duo. We can chat, whatever you need to do. Let's talk about these, and some of these for the following weeks, I should say, probably might help some of you in your final paper. So do not hesitate to utilize these. Many of them are from larger articles, and since you need journal articles, so everyone that you read this week has a journal article that it came from, right? So the textbook is a reader. They take journal articles and then put them into kind of smaller, bite-sized, easier digestible pieces. So if you use one of these, make sure that you go and find the actual journal article that it comes from, and it has more detail. It'll have better quotes for you as well. You'll be better off for it. And you have to have journal articles for the step 4 and step 5 of your research paper as it is. So, all right, have a happy week, and I can't wait to see what y'all have.